At 4:17 local time, the radar catches a single spike. Not a routine sweep, not background clutter. One clean return, solid, fast, heavy, appears where nothing is supposed to be. At first, the room barely moves. It never does. Screens glow in the dim light. Consoles murmur. A watchstander leans closer, eyes narrowing, fingers frozen above the controls. The contact holds for a breath, then sharpens. New track, someone says, voice level, almost flat. The plot settles, altitude rising, speed increasing. No transponder, no civilian code, no friendly squawk. The bearing fits nothing ordinary, not air traffic, not weather, not anything expected in that sector. A second sensor confirms it, then a third. The room exhales, not in relief, but in certainty. This is no glitch. This is no accident. This is deliberate. A timeline starts. The track climbs through airspace commercial aircraft never use. It doesn't drift. It doesn't correct. It commits. Straight, intentional, precise. Its course aimed to brush the edge of monitored airspace at exactly the right moment. Whoever is flying knows the geometry, knows the boundaries, knows exactly how close is close enough. Condition 3, says the officer of the watch. Not loud, not rushed, but the effect is immediate. Chairs roll back, headsets settle into place. A pen clicks once and begins moving across paper. Then another return appears. Thermal, hot, sustained. 4 engines feeding a mass that keeps climbing without hesitation. The signature doesn't match a patrol aircraft, doesn't match a transport, doesn't match anything pretending to be routine. The engines burn evenly, neither surging nor idling, carrying the aircraft toward an altitude usually reserved for long-range strategic platforms. No one says the name yet. The contact crosses another speed threshold. Numbers climb. The track on the display remains clean, free of the jitter that usually comes with uncertainty. This aircraft belongs at altitude. It was built for that thin air, built to stay there for hours, built to be noticed. A supervisor steps in behind the console. He doesn't touch anything. He doesn't need to. The data is clear enough on its own. Variable geometry wings, long fuselage, weight distributed where payload would sit. Piece by piece, the math resolves into a familiar shape. Everyone recognizes it before the software completes the label. Then the identifier flashes. A pause follows. Not shock, not fear, recognition, a strategic bomber. The course does not change. Calls go out on emergency frequencies. Professional, standard, calm. The message disappears into silence and returns with nothing. No acknowledgement, no courtesy, no hint of confusion. The silence itself is a choice. The bomber keeps climbing. At that height, the sky darkens, the air thins, and the horizon curves. From there, a crew can see beyond weather, beyond traffic, beyond the ordinary business of flight. From there, every radar sweep reveals something useful. Track steady, the watchstander reports. The captain arrives without ceremony. He stands behind the row of chairs, hands folded, eyes fixed on the display. He doesn't ask for a summary. He doesn't need one. The line on the screen is telling the story minute by minute. Speed, altitude, bearing, no deviation, no hesitation. Log everything, he says. The bomber reaches its planned altitude and levels off with perfect control. No overshoot, no correction. The engine tone settles into something that speaks of endurance. Then the course shifts by a single degree, just enough to test reaction time without crossing a formal boundary, just enough to force a decision. The phones remain quiet, no public words, no alarms. Somewhere else, other rooms are watching the same feed. Somewhere else, other crews are already moving. Here, the only sounds are circuitry, breathing, and the scratch of ink against paper. Another radio call, another silence. The bomber closes on the invisible line, the one no one draws, but everyone knows. The window to react grows smaller. Minutes matter now. Soon, seconds will. Closest point of approach is tightening, the plotter says. Not by chance, by design. The aircraft is flying the razor's edge of escalation, measuring discipline, inviting a response without quite demanding one. The captain gives a single nod. Hold. No one looks away. The contact keeps coming. Massive, steady, completely untroubled. A machine built to apply pressure without ever needing to rush. It does not hide, it does not hurry. It moves as if the sky were already part of its plan. And in that calm, carefully controlled approach, the message becomes impossible to miss. This is not a navigation mistake. This is intentional. At 4:29, the bomber still hasn't turned. It holds course, steady and unapologetic, engines burning with an intensity that leaves no doubt. This is not a simple transit. This is not a routine patrol. The aircraft remains in that narrow envelope where reaction time matters and miscalculation becomes history. Another call goes out. Same wording. Same calm delivery. Still nothing. Then the track accelerates again, not dramatically, just enough to cut precious minutes from the response window. The adjustment is subtle, but no one misses it. Speed increases with no climb, no descent. The bomber is refining its position. Velocity up, the plotter says. That is the moment the warning sounds elsewhere. Scramble orders move through bases already half awake. Hangar doors roll open. Floodlights snap to life. Pilots move at a pace just shy of a sprint. Helmets tucked under their arms, every motion guided by repetition and instinct. Ground crews break in practiced rhythm, panels open, ladders drop, safety pins come free, engines light in sequence, deep thunder rolling across the cold pre-dawn air. Inside the command center, screens multiply, new feeds appear, airfields glow, timelines overlap. The bomber continues forward while the response rises to meet it. No one says intercept, no one has to. The strategic aircraft reaches another altitude gate and holds it exactly, right where every analyst in the room knows performance, range, and posture begin to matter in a different way. This is the height where capability stops being symbolic and starts feeling operational. Still no radio reply. Track stable, someone reports. Then the bomber makes a slight heading change. Barely a degree, but enough to send calculations racing across multiple stations. The new vector matches nothing civilian. It crosses no airway. It threads around weather with surgical precision. This path was chosen, not drifted into, chosen. That is when the first NATO fighters lift off. On the displays, their icons appear as sharp triangles accelerating fast, climbing hard, angling toward a rendezvous point calculated in real time. This is not a pursuit, it is geometry under pressure. Inside the fighter cockpits, there is very little talk. Breathing remains steady, hands stay light on the controls. The pilots have done this before, not with this aircraft, not in this exact profile, but the principles remain the same. Identify, shadow, avoid provocation, hold discipline. Back in the command center, the bomber still dominates the screen. Larger, slower to turn, impossible to ignore. Its emissions are controlled and measured, scanning in patterns that gather information without triggering the kind of reaction that would instantly raise the stakes. It is not searching blindly, it is collecting. Electronic activity confirmed, the EW officer says. Passive, but active enough. The captain says nothing. This part was expected. The bomber is close enough now to read every response, close enough to feel attention tighten around it. Close enough to force the other side to reveal tempo, posture, readiness, without ever stepping across the line that would demand a harder answer. The fighters climb to altitude and level on an intercept path that brings them in from the side rather than the front. That choice is deliberate. Head-on escalates, lateral signals control. The bomber gives no visible reaction, no turn, no change in speed, no sign of defensive posture. It continues as if the encounter had already been accounted for long before either side left the ground. Minutes pass. The distance collapses to visual range. The fighter sensors confirm what radar had already shown. Immense wings, swept geometry, engines arranged for reach and persistence. A machine designed for global presence, now lingering at the edge of another nation's patience. Still no radio call. The fighters ease into position, offset, disciplined, close enough to read markings, close enough to be seen in return. This is the kind of moment where misunderstanding can become something far larger. Two highly trained crews operating in the same narrow slice of sky, separated by little more than protocol and restraint. Then the bomber makes another tiny correction, not away, toward. Inside the command center, the wall clock suddenly seems louder than it should. If it holds this vector, someone says quietly, we're inside the decision window. The captain gives one small nod. No orders change. The fighters hold their place, and the bomber keeps pressing forward, calm and unreadable. The sky is crowded now, not with aircraft, but with consequences. Every movement is recorded, every second stamped, every system is listening. This is no longer about detection, this is about composure. At 4:41, the distance tightens to the point where even the smallest move carries weight. The fighters hold a beam offset, positioned carefully, close enough to observe every detail through their sensors, but far enough to remain non-threatening. The bomber dominates the picture. Long fuselage, wings locked into cruise, engines steady. No evasive posture, no defensive signals, no sign of surprise. It flies like it knew this moment was coming. Inside the intercepting aircraft, the pilots remain silent. They don't need to speak. Their displays are stable, parameters steady, systems secure, cameras capturing everything. This isn't confrontation, this is documentation. The bomber holds its altitude perfectly. That matters. At this level, the air supports maximum range and optimal sensor performance. At this level, capability is no longer theoretical. It's evident. Back in the command center, the electronic picture sharpens. The bomber's emissions are controlled, deliberate. Radar modes designed to observe without provoking. A careful balance, enough to gather information, not enough to trigger a reaction. They're painting, the EW officer says. Selective. That's not random. That's precision. The fighters maintain their position. Their own systems stay quiet, relying on passive inputs and shared data. Silence here is an advantage. Every second without transmitting is a second the bomber gains nothing new. Then the bomber shifts. It's subtle, almost invisible unless you're watching the numbers closely. A slight adjustment of the nose, a fractional change in heading. The track bends inward, not away. A probe, not a commitment. This is where mistakes happen. The rules are clear but unforgiving. If the bomber continues forward, reaction time shrinks to seconds. If it turns away, the situation eases without a word. If it holds steady, the tension stretches. Thin, fragile. The fighters mirror the motion, matching geometry without closing distance. Discipline over instinct. Presence without pressure. Maintain station, the lead pilot says. Calm, controlled, recorded. The bomber offers no response. From this angle, sensors pick up the engine heat. Steady, symmetrical, no sudden changes, no defensive cues. The aircraft isn't preparing to run, it isn't bracing, it's waiting. In the command center, the captain leans forward slightly. No words. Just watching the clock, the vectors, the margins narrowing. This is the tightest point, the place where escalation lives. Closest point, 1.5, the plotter reports. The distance continues to close. The bomber holds altitude and speed. That alone is a message. Control, confidence, precision. The crew knows exactly how close they can come and exactly where the line is. The fighter cameras capture everything. Surface markings, panel details, antenna placements, every visible feature recorded in real time. Valuable data collected without a single aggressive move. The bomber is being studied, whether it wants to be or not. Then another adjustment. This time, not direction, timing. A slight reduction in speed, barely noticeable but enough to shift the intercept geometry. The window stretches by seconds, and here, seconds matter. Inside the fighters, breathing stays slow. No sudden movements, no raised voices. This is restraint moving at high speed. Intent unclear, an analyst says. That's the point, another replies quietly. Ambiguity is leverage. The bomber's radar pauses for a fraction of a cycle, then resumes. The fighter warning systems remain silent. No lock, no tone. The threshold hasn't been crossed. Not yet. At this altitude, the sky looks calm, almost peaceful. Sunlight reflects off metal. Vapor trails stretch thin and straight. To anyone watching from below, it might seem serene. It isn't. Every system is active. Every operator is calculating. Every second without escalation makes the next move more significant. The bomber reaches the edge of that invisible line, the one defined not by borders, but by restraint. It holds there, perfectly balanced. For a moment, nothing happens. No turn, no signal, no sound beyond the systems themselves. Inside this window, silence is the loudest thing there is. This is the moment, someone says quietly in the command center. Not a question, a fact. If the bomber moves forward now, the response will be immediate. If it turns away, the encounter ends quietly. Both sides know it. Both have run the same calculations. The fighters hold their position. The bomber hesitates. And in that hesitation, everything hangs in balance. Because this is where miscalculation rewrites outcomes. At 4:46, something changes, but not in the sky. The bomber remains steady at the edge. The fighters maintain their offset, controlled and precise. To an outside observer, it looks frozen, metal suspended against a pale horizon. But beneath the surface, everything shifts. In rooms the bomber cannot see, timelines adjust. Quietly, efficiently. No announcements, no visible signals. The response doesn't reveal itself, it reorganizes. A message moves up and down the chain in seconds. Brief, direct, understood. The geometry in the sky remains unchanged, and that's intentional. Stillness creates pressure. Movement invites interpretation. Holding position forces calculation. The bomber continues scanning, but the pattern tightens. Shorter sweeps, focused arcs. It's listening more carefully now, checking for any shift in the environment. There is one. Subtle. Almost undetectable without a reference point. The background changes. Passive returns stack differently. The sky hasn't become louder, but it has become denser. The crew would feel it before they could define it. Inside the fighters, nothing changes. No switches move. No systems escalate. Cameras keep recording. Silence continues to carry weight. The aircraft remain exactly where they should be. Close enough to matter, far enough to keep things controlled. Hold, comes the instruction again. Same word, same tone. Then the bomber moves. Not forward, not away, sideways. A shallow turn, measured, deliberate, bleeding lateral distance without giving up position. A careful adjustment wrapped in ambiguity. Testing where the pressure eases when the approach is no longer direct. Inside the command center, the display reacts instantly. Vectors shift, calculations update. The change creates space. Seconds first, then minutes. That's a signal, an analyst says. The captain nods once. No reaction beyond that. This isn't a win, it's communication, spoken through distance, angles, and timing. The fighters adjust smoothly, matching the lateral movement without closing in. No pursuit, no pressure, just presence. Steady, controlled. The bomber slows slightly again, not enough to call it a withdrawal, just enough to change the equation. Now the decision window begins to open instead of close. Time stretches, the edge softens. The bomber's emissions ease. Not gone, never gone, but less probing, less insistent. Like stepping back without fully leaving, the fighters remain silent. Beyond the visible scene, additional elements take position. Unseen, unannounced. Layers build quietly. Redundancy appears where none was visible before. The sky looks the same. But the outcome is no longer the same. The bomber's crew senses it too. Their instruments tell the same story. Strategic aircraft aren't just built to project presence, they're built to read it. Then comes another turn. This one is clear. The nose angles away from the line. Not sharply, not dramatically, but enough to break the geometry that defined the standoff. It isn't a retreat that draws attention. It's a disengagement that keeps dignity intact. Inside the fighters, nothing changes. They don't close in, they don't signal, they don't react beyond maintaining position. Professional restraint, right to the end. Vector confirmed. The track is diverging, the plotter says. The captain exhales, barely noticeable. No one speaks, no one celebrates. There's nothing to celebrate. The bomber has made its decision and the sky is already safer because of it. The fighters hold position a moment longer, making sure the trend is real. It is. The distance begins to grow, tenths of a mile, then full miles. The bomber keeps its altitude, but its intent is no longer the same. The window closes quietly. Not with noise, not with drama, just with calculation. This is how it ends, someone says under their breath. The bomber continues on its new heading. The line on the display curves away from tension. No radio calls, no final signal, no acknowledgement. The response was quick, but never loud. No threats, no theatrics, just geometry, discipline, and the understanding that the strongest message is often the one never spoken. As the distance increases and the sky begins to clear, one truth settles across the room. The message was delivered, without a single word. At 5:02, the bomber leaves the monitored sector. Not suddenly, not climbing or diving. It exits the same way it arrived. Steady, controlled, calculated to appear routine to anyone not watching closely. On the display, the track stretches outward, thinning with distance. The aircraft becomes just another signal, then a smaller one, then little more than a marker. The fighters don't follow. They hold just long enough to confirm the departure, then ease back onto their own paths. Engines settle. Fuel numbers adjust automatically. No gestures, no extra movement. The moment is already over. Extending it would only change its meaning. Back in the command center, the room exhales for the first time in nearly an hour. Screens rewind, data layers stack, timelines replay, second by second. Not for drama, but for precision. Every change in speed, every slight heading shift, every pause in emissions. Captured, compared, understood. This is where the real work begins. There's no public statement, no alert, no carefully crafted message for headlines. In modern deterrence, silence isn't emptiness, it's control. If the record needs to speak, it will, later. The captain stays until the analysis begins, then quietly steps back. His role was never about attention, it was about preventing it. Around the room, watchstanders continue their logs. Pens move, keyboards click, the focus never fades. The situation didn't end because someone hesitated, it ended because the numbers stopped supporting risk. Event resolved, the officer of the watch says. Not defeated, not driven off, resolved. The distinction matters. Outside, the sky looks unchanged. Thin contrails drift and disappear. Commercial aircraft continue along distant routes, unaware of how close the morning came to becoming something else. That's intentional. In the hours that follow, briefings move outward. Not explanations, summaries, not warnings, facts. Just enough to adjust awareness without drawing attention. This is what modern deterrence looks like. No weapons used, no escalation, no public exchange, just a shared understanding of limits, maintained without crossing them. Far beyond the horizon, the bomber continues its flight. The crew returns to routine, documenting their own version of the encounter. Precise, technical, careful in every word. They'll note the fighters, the positioning, the moment the environment shifted. They'll understand. Back here, the final logs are signed. Time brackets the event, beginning, peak, resolution. It joins a long list of moments that never reached the headlines and never needed to. Because the real outcome wasn't the turnaway. It was everything that didn't happen. No miscalculation, no escalation, no irreversible decision made in the sky. The system worked. Not because it was loud, not because it was fast, because it was disciplined. This is the part rarely seen. Not the aircraft, not the intercept, but the restraint behind it. The training that keeps voices steady, the procedures that keep hands still, the confidence to hold position when instinct says move. Still, one question lingers. Quiet. Unspoken. What if the bomber hadn't turned? The answer exists. It doesn't need to be said. Everyone in that room already knows. They know how quickly calm can unravel once certain thresholds are crossed. And that understanding is exactly the point. The bomber's departure doesn't close anything. It adds another entry, another data point, another measure of resolve. Tomorrow, the sky will be watched again. The boundaries will remain invisible. The systems will stay ready. And if another contact appears where nothing should be, if another aircraft tests that narrow edge, the response will look just as uneventful to anyone not paying attention. Because the most effective show of strength is the one that never turns into a fight. No shots taken, no weapons used, and still everything changed.